Thank you so much for joining us. We're always looking for ways to make it easier for people to live healthier lives by detoxifying from harmful chemicals. However, toxic chemicals aren't the only factors in our environment that can impact our well-being. And there is increasing evidence that electromagnetic frequencies, EMFs, from cell phones and Bluetooth devices could be impacting our health. That's why we're really excited today to be joined by Daniel DeBaun. Daniel is the co-author of the best-selling EMF book, Radiation Nation, The Fallout of Modern Technology, the complete guide to EMF radiation safety and protection. He's also the inventor of DefenderShield, EMF radiation protection technology for mobile devices. So we're going to discuss the health effect of EMF radiation and how to lower your risk of exposures today. So
All right, very good. How are you today? Thank you for
Good.
inviting me.
No, thank you so much. This is a topic I think many of our audience have been really interested in, and we briefly touched upon by different, naturopath doctors and also detox experts, but not someone like who's really specialized on EMF. So we're like so excited today that you're willing to chat with us about EMF.
Yep, I'm excited about sharing our experience on the subject matter. It's a subject matter people should understand. Controversial, but everyone should try to understand it.
Absolutely. So before we start, could you tell us a little bit about your background, like how you came to be the inventor of the Defender Shield?
I will. Um, many years ago, I worked for Bell Labs, and in Bell Labs, it was the research and support for the telephone companies. So all the networks that were up and running, I was responsible for setting the standards and also testing technology to those standards. So that's what I did for years and years. Fast forward till about 11, 12 years ago, my sons were visiting, they're adult men. They had laptops on their lap, and my wife says, that can't be good for you. And I thought about it a little bit and I said, no, the power levels are too low. I tested technology, so I was very familiar with what was coming off these technologies. And then I said, well, let me go take a quick look. And I began looking into the research side of electromagnetic radiation exposures. And I was surprised. I found out even back then, we knew that more than 25% of the male sperm becomes immobile after exposures to electromagnetic radiation in laptops. So I was a mechanical engineer by trade, so I designed a technology that shielded that so my sons could put their laptop on their lap and be protected. But Jenna, I still don't have grandchildren.
Soon enough, maybe soon enough.
Maybe. Let's hope so.
Yeah, we have seen like a huge decrease in sperm quality and sperm count. And then besides, the chemicals that we're trying to address, like EMF, it's probably a big thing. And we also have seen trends like people working in tech, working like these industries might have lower, quality of their sperms. And that
Yeah, well, it turns out there's sort of a lot of science about this kind of stuff. And it really is true that after several hours of intense exposures, there is a degrading of the cells around the body. When I wrote Radiation Nation with my son, I had probably the most intelligent biochemist in the country, and he was like the first X-ray guy in the country. He goes back many years. And he looked at my book, and I had mentioned to him, if you take a cell phone and you put it in the back pocket of a 12-year-old girl, there's a potential that exposure could mutate the cell in the room of a child, and that she can grow up and potentially have DNA damaged cells within the child that's born. He said, Dan, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not really sure that's actually true. He said, but let me think about it. About a year or two later, he calls me up and he said, I had a woman come into my office and she had a stillborn child, and she was very exposed to RF signals from the laptop, from the cell phone, from the use of the device. And he said, though the probability of having two mutated cells that I found were zero. So, Dan, I, in my own clinic, seem to indicate that it may actually be true. So we really don't know because there's not enough data to really justify us saying with confidence it's 100% probable that you're going or the exposure is going to be hurt. But there's a lot of anecdotal stuff, more and more in our environment that we're learning about that seems to indicate that may be true.
Absolutely. Like one thing we always talked about, at least for chemical exposure, is this precautionary principle. If we know that something could be bad, even if we don't know for sure, people should take actions or at least be aware and take
Yeah,
actions so then we
yeah,
can
that's it,
prevent
right.
it.
Yeah, actually, Jenna, it's good you refer to it as a toxin because it is in fact a toxin. It's an external expose. It's like a, arsenic.
Mhm.
Arsenic is considered a toxin. It's a to be probable toxin. That means it's probably a toxin that can cause cancer. Well, guess what? Electromagnetic radiation is also a to be carcinogenic by the World Health Organization. It's the identical kind of reference, and the science knows that this can be serious, and there are organizations like the World Health that are defining toxins, saying it's also potentially dangerous.
Yeah, but we have solutions, which is what I'm gonna ask you about. So, what is Defender Shield?
DefenderShield is, as I started off before, it turns out that when I built a device for my sons to use, it was for a laptop, and it was the DefenderShield DefenderPad laptop we built. And I built 100 of them, and then let's see what happens. It turns out that my son's friends and their friends sort of wanted to try it, right? So I built it for them, right? And I figured, well, I'll do 100 of them or so, and then maybe if nothing happens, we'll stop producing them. Well, that was 11 years ago, and we've gone far beyond where we started.
That is amazing. So I gave like a really brief introduction, but you're the expert on EMF. So like let's go back to the basic of it. Like what are EMFs?
Okay. So it's all around us and has been for years. It's getting closer and closer to us. The devices that are creating emissions are getting closer and closer. When we talk about electromagnetic radiation, the motor in your refrigerator, the dryer you use to dry your hair, the wiring in the wall, that produces electromagnetic radiation, extremely low frequency electromagnetic radiation. So that's one source. And then, of course, your cell phones, they're around 1 gigahertz. That's how they communicate to the cell tower. That's also electromagnetic radiation. It's radio frequency electromagnetic radiation, but it's also a microwave radiation. A microwave, by definition, heats up has a thermal presence, right? So it turns out that we're using devices around us that emit microwave signals that heat up the cells. Then you start looking into the more 5G technologies that we're talking about these days, and you'll find there's many, many more signals that are being created that go higher and higher and higher. We had 1 gigahertz. That's 1 billion cycles in 1 second. And you talk about 5G, there's a lot of stuff in 5G that's around the same area, but there's also new stuff that around 20 gigahertz, 60 gigahertz, that's 60 cycles per second. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of technology that's being thrown at us that we haven't seen before, and know little about. And then when you look at a screen on a monitor, you're looking at, but in the spectrum, blue light. That's electromagnetic radiation. It's like at the cusp between non-ionized and ionized radiation. That is, there's a difference between the two, which I can explain later, maybe. And then that's why we talk about blue light shielding glasses or something, because it's really potentially dangerous. X-rays are electromagnetic radiation. So it's a full spectrum of technologies that are around us. And some of this stuff is getting closer and closer. Meaning, as it gets closer, it potentially becomes more dangerous to the user.
So,
And that's what, go ahead.
just following up on what you were saying is, so why should we be concerned about EMFs? So you mentioned about potential like cell and DNA damages. What are other things? Why should we be concerned?
Jenna, it's funny. There is scientific evidence, not statistically significant. In other words, there's not enough data for us to really know, but there is clear studies that show a direct correlation between a RF exposure and a cancer. That's a very, very small population. The bigger problem potentially is when you're exposed to this stuff, the body's reacting to it. It's a toxin, right? And the body reacts to all toxins in similar ways. So what you have is your eyes may hurt a little bit. You may get headaches. You may not sleep quite right. You may be depressed. You may be anxious. You have concussion-like symptoms. You may have flu-like symptoms. All of these above are exposure to symptoms to the body that from those RF exposures. So it can get serious. And by the way, like 20% of the population has that one of those or more or multiple of those symptoms. Believe it or not. You got a headache. Doctor, I have a headache. It gives you 2 aspirin. The problem is you got a Wi-Fi sitting next to you, and that's what's bothering you. So that's what you got to be careful about.
I also think that this is like a quality of life issue, right? If you like have like a really poor quality of life, you have no productivity, then what's the point? Like, even if you don't have cancer, but if you have such low quality of life,
No
it's like,
question
what's
about
worth
it.
to living, right?
Yeah, and another thing that's actually a little bit more serious is that it suppresses your immune system. RF is a suppressing power, energy that suppresses your own immune system. So your gut gets exposed a bit. Your blood-brain barrier is reduced. Your frontal lobes are more exposed. There's a lot of impacts because of that exposure to the human body that normally doesn't occur when you're exposed. You take that same device and you put it 4 foot away from you, 5 foot away, there's no danger. If it's to your head, it's a lot of potential concern.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned about different types of EMF emissions, like microwaves,
Right.
like like screens and 5Gs. So what are some tips of lowering your EMF exposure to these different types of the emissions?
Believe it or not, distance is your friend.
This-
When I use a cell phone, of course I use it with shielding, but when I use a cell phone, I have it on my head because I shield it. If you don't shield it, if you use it for a few minutes, you're fine. It's really not going to have a long-term impact. It's when you do heavy use, more than a couple of hours a day, over a 10-year period, you are 3 times more likely to get frontal lobe cancer. I mean, this is statistics from the metadata that we've seen in science. So there could be a serious impact with the use of it, but simply moving away from you helps. If you're 1 foot away, it's 80, like 80% of the danger is gone at 1 to 2 feet, 100% by 4 foot. Other courses turn it off. Like I use a cell phone, and there could be a Bluetooth, a Wi-Fi, a GPS, and a cell phone connected. They're all transmitters. They're all transmitting out of your cell phone, right? You don't need any of those things. I just talk on my phone. So for me, I just keep my cell phone connection up. I don't have the other four. I talk about that as bees in the room. The more bees you have, the more likely it'll affect you. The less bees you have, the better off you are. One bee won't kill you, 1,000 will, right? So it's simple things like exercise the fact that reduce the number of transmitters in a room, connect with wires. You don't use Wi-Fi, use Ethernet connections to your devices. That reduces it. So in general, you simply try to reduce the rooms. If you can't, use distance as your friend, or time durations, as I mentioned before, keeping it short. Beyond that, you really want to consider other methods like shielding devices that can protect you when you're using the technologies.
Is there a link between these, like a new frequency, like newer technologies, and the new EMF and the cyber crime?
Ah, that's a wonderful question, Jen. It turns out that with the network we have today, with the 4G and below, it was really all about calling another person. Then it more recently became data being transferred from one device to another. Is very evolutionary in what it's been able to do. With 5G, it's all about interconnecting everything, Internet of Things, they call it, right? So all of a sudden, you have all these smart devices in the end of the network that are getting access into the networks. So that is the cyber concern of great proportion, because where before the access was only from one device, it can be thousands and thousands and thousands. So you have exposures on your network that never existed before. You have many more frequency rates that are going to be in. And with 5G, the intent of 5G is to eliminate Wi-Fi. So when you have the Internet of Things connecting to a device, it's not through your Wi-Fi anymore. It's directly to the network. And so all of a sudden, that becomes more problematic. And one more subtle difference is that the networks are controlled by software systems, very large software systems, and it connects to the network and it controls the network. Well, all of a sudden with 5G, you have access to the controls of the network, and that changes the name of the game too. So there are many, many potential concerns you have with security and the safety of your own data as we mature into the new 5th generation to 6th generation technologies.
That's a bit scary. Not only you have like a data safety concern, but also like a human health safety concerns as
Oh
well.
yeah. Oh, it's funny with the signals of 5 and 6G. To give you a sense, with 6G, the next generation after 5G, it's at a terahertz. X-rays are in the terahertz space. So we're starting to bring external pollutants into our environment that have never existed. And so we really don't know what's going to happen with that. Some scientists suggest that's not a good thing. Others claim it is not going to be bothersome to the human body. Time will tell.
Well, this makes the shielding really important. I also see you don't even use a headset. I use a Bluetooth headset. Now I'm like, okay, I need shielding for this.
Here's a couple of seconds about that. When you have a Bluetooth signal, it's at about, I don't know, 3 watts or so, 0.3 watts. A cell phone is 1.6 watts. A Bluetooth signal is 0.3, so like 5 times less the power level. It takes 0.1 watts to mutate a frontal lobe cell. So when you have earbuds on, it goes through your head to connect to the other side with some of these devices. I would never use them for that very reason. The power,
I saw.
although they're low, there's some science that says it's a problem.
I could see that now. So now I want to ask about the Defender
And
Shield
by the way,
products,
that's
because
why I designed these. I
yes,
built
yes,
these to eliminate that.
that's
You know, it was
that's
like I I eliminated the electrical signal. With these, I convert it with a little mic, a speaker right here, and it goes acoustical. It goes through a tube into my ears. So I never have the problem of electromagnetic radiation exposure to my ears. And that's why I did it, is to eliminate it. Because for some, it is really bothersome.
Mhm.
It really bothers some people, and they get a headache when they're using a cell phone. And this helps minimize that exposure.
That's exactly where I was leading to, is the different type of Defender Shield products that you have. And because I saw on the website you do have a headset, actually multiple type of headsets. So what are some the products? Tell us a little more about.
You know, we started off with the Defender Pad, 11, 12 years ago. And then I was listening to, I read an article about a parents who bought a 6-year-old child a cell phone, and a year later she had frontal lobe cancer. That is not sufficient evidence to suggest cell phones create that cancer, but it was their view that that's what happened to their child. And I got upset because I knew that the shielding technology I put in my laptop would work on a cell phone. It would just stop the signal. And that's what we did. We started a whole product line of cell phone cases that are designed to eliminate the signal to the head. Allows you to connect to the cell tower, but it prevents you from getting any interference or intrusion into the head. And that was driven by a story I read, and that went to pregnant women. We have belly protection for the womb of a woman, because under heavy exposures, they have to be more times likely to have miscarriage in the first trimester.
Mhm.
That's a quote of a study. So we know these are facts, and so we created that. We have a blanket. It started off as a baby blanket to protect the child, and then now we have adult blankets. So it kept on going and going. We kept on creating products that just help people deal with the environment we find ourselves in. Precautionary measures, as you said.
I love it. So you mentioned that how Defender Shield works is it's like putting different metals, but block the signal, but not blocking other useful things.
Right.
Maybe tell us a little bit high level. Tell us a little more.
Actually,
Describing it more clearly.
funny you asked that question, because it took me over 2 years in the very recent past. All the technologies known to the man was able to go up to about 20 gigahertz for shielding. And I knew we had to get up to at least 90 gigahertz, because that was what the technology is. So we've been working with fabrication of those technologies for the last several years, and it created a line of products, shielding materials that we actually have, and it does the complete spectrum of 5G. Jenna, the other thing I want to mention is, in all of this stuff, you got to stay healthy. You really do. Eating right, sleeping right,
Yes.
all the supplements maybe. One of the things that we did a few years ago is we began looking at how we could supplement the body's performance in protecting it. Rather, so when you're exposed, the body has a more resilience to
Mhm.
trying to deal with it. So we actually created another product company, Light Body, which is protecting from the inside. It's simply taking the body and helping the body perform at its peak when exposed. So in the life cycle of health and wellness, you got to think of all those things, not just the shielding or the distance. It's
Absolutely.
all those things, right?
Absolutely. We have one question. Says my whole head feels like a brick from EMFs. Why do some people not feel it? I guess this is very individualized.
Well, I know of people who cannot put a cell phone to their head. They can feel it that much. So that person who has that question is amongst the 20% of us that feel it in various stages. And it is not unusual for someone to have what they feel like a severe headache or pounding. That is not unusual from a cell phone. Simple solution, move it away from you. Move the transmission outside. Put shielding in front of you. There was a guy who invented or created the first cases for all the technologies recently. He was out in California and he couldn't use the cell phone anymore. He used it so much. And I said, use my case. And he said, I don't believe you. Well, he tried it and he could use it. And he was so thankful because he hadn't been able to put a cell phone to his head for years because of the exposures.
Yeah. Besides these anecdotal stories, we're big believers in independent testing because we think testing can really reveal the objective data. So is DefenderShield independently tested?
Absolutely. Yeah, Jenna, I actually know more about testing because that's what I did for a living, right? But I had to send, you can't believe me, I had to send it out to make sure that independently it
Yes.
did what I claimed. And really true. That's sort of important in this environment, as in all technologies. You really should have, when you have a claim being made, that being tested by independent sources to ensure that that claim is legitimate.
So out of all the products DefenderShield carry, so what's the good product for, if someone's looking into starting, transitioning into a low frequency like lifestyle? What's a good product that people need to get
Believe
right
it or
away?
not, another way of answering that question is telling you our best product. It's this. People, because I spent probably 9 months creating the echo chamber inside here.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was like a high quality, and it took a long time to create it, but it is high quality sound. And a lot of people seem to like that amongst all of our products. So that has actually become our best-selling product.
That's good to know. I felt like I need one and then start.
You do. We'll send you some.
And then besides that, obviously distance, you mentioned distance and time are really important. So leave your devices hopefully out of your sights. And also if you need to use it, don't use it for prolonged time.
Right, exactly. I tell you, when I go home at night, when I walk into the door, there's a desk there. I put it on my phone on the desk, and I don't worry about it. I keep my home pretty clean all the time. What I do most assuredly it needs to be done is you do not want to use laptops, cell phones in your bedroom before you sleep. You
Yes.
literally disrupt sleep when you have these. I was talking to a very bright woman, and I was telling her that take this cell phone away from your nightstand. And she was very polite and said, thank you so much for giving me that information. She didn't believe me. She called me back 2 weeks later. She says, my husband and I are sleeping. So it's really true. Cell phones and these devices do disrupt the body and the process of systems within the body.
We have another question. Don't you think the towers that covers us affect our bodies, whether we have a phone next to our heads or not?
Ask the question again.
Don't you think the towers that cover us affect our bodies? I think it made it the cell towers.
Yeah. They absolutely do. In fact, you really don't want to be within 1,000 feet of a cell tower. There are studies that show you're 3 times more likely to have cancer, and when you're within 1,000 feet. So you really want to stay clean of the cell tower if you can, because there is scientific evidence that shows that there's an increased probability of cancer.
I also think like, cell tower, we obviously can't replace the cell tower. We still need it, which makes avoiding other exposures that we can control of really important. Like, our headset, leaving our phone out of our bedroom makes all these action steps really, really important.
Jenna, absolutely true. Believe it or not, you need none of the technologies I created. If you do basic things, put it away from you a bit. Don't use it as much. Don't bring it with don't let the kids use it. A cell phone signal goes into a 6-foot male. This is the standard 6-foot male, 1 to 2 inches, and heats up by 2 degrees. That's the standard. It was based on 6-foot males, which represents about 3% of the population. 3%. When a child uses a cell phone, it goes completely through their head. So you really want to consider the use of time with the cell phone, particularly when you have very young,
Yes.
because it's their whole life exposure.
It's again, like totally echoing what we're trying to tell people about environmental toxins. Is also there's this vulnerable period, especially for kids when they're growing or pregnant women.
Right.
These are very critical times that you want to avoid these exposures, same similar as the EMFs.
Absolutely. It's a toxin. It's just another toxin in our environment. Probably 100 years from now, our body will be able to deal with it and be less impactful. But right now, it's new to the human body, and the body's evolving and trying to understand how it's going to respond to this environment.
Wow. So thank you so much for all these knowledge. And everyone, like, thank you for joining us today. And be sure to follow DefenderShield at DefenderShield, and then, learn more about Daniel's technology and get your hands on some of these devices if you use, you use your cell phone or use other things often, and or especially if you have young kids or or pregnant. So thank you so much.
Jenna, thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed our time, and I see you as almost as passionate as I am.
No, totally. Like anything I feel like it can help people increase their well-being, optimize their lifestyle. It's so important, especially post-COVID, that we know how important our immune system are, and then like how important it is to keep a healthy lifestyle.
Right. Very much. You have a 24-hour life cycle of health. Make sure you do right things all 24 hours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You have a good day.
You too. Bye.